everyone, welcome back to another segment of the 2023 AWS End User Computing Innovation Day. I'm your co-host, Jeff Marushak. I'm a Senior Solutions Architect on our Department of Defense Air Force team. And with me, we have Justin and Manav. Will you guys introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. Hi, my name is Manav Verma. I'm a Senior Product Manager at AWS End User Compute Services. I work with Justin and the rest of my team to develop innovative solutions for you guys. I've been here for the last 2 years and looking forward for more number of years here.
Justin?
Yeah, my name is Justin Grego. I'm a Senior EUC Specialized Solutions Architect. I'm a member of the EUC Service Aligned SA team, and like Manav said, we work closely together on developing and bringing new features out.
Well, so a lot of the segments so far this morning has been around workspaces. We just got done talking about workspaces core. We haven't talked too much about AppStream yet, but this session, let's talk about SaaS. So SaaS is nothing new, software as a service. It's another model. It's another way of presenting applications. But add in some of your color. SaaS, did I get that right? Just software as a service. What else can you fill us and our viewers in about SaaS?
So absolutely, Jeff, what you said, software as a service, SaaS, yes, that's a term everybody knows about it. But in this particular session, we will deep dive into how AppStream can help our audience to convert their on-premise app into software as a service. But before I go there, I'll talk about some of the benefits that the software as a service is going to offer and why our audience needs to convert their on-premise app into software as a service.
Yeah.
If you look at my slide, there was a survey conducted by IDC back in 2022, and 80% of the people who were surveyed, they said they would like to consume application in the SaaS form factor. And organizations are taking right steps. They are transforming their business to convert their monolithic on-premise app into cloud-based microservices, which offer subscription-based offering to our end users. And given that, the overall revenue from software as a service is going to increase by 245% in next 5 years.
Yeah, so what's interesting is why would customers want this? But I can, off the top of my head, I can see you don't have to install software. It's easier to upgrade because these customers that want these SaaS applications, they have their own customers to think about, and they just want it to be easier. They want to, am I on the right track?
Yeah, it's all those
absolutely.
things. And it's important to emphasize that this isn't just companies that want to provide applications to their customers. It could be enterprise IT wanting to SaaSify applications and provide it to their internal users and their consultants.
So absolutely. So the benefits are there for both the end user, the consumer of the application, as you rightly said.
Yeah.
I don't need to manage the operation and manageability of the application, how it's installed, how it scales up, and so on and so forth. Whereas there are benefits for the provider, the software provider as well. That's what we see on the previous slide, that the return on investment and the speed of revenue is also increasing when organizations are moving their on-premise app into a SaaS form factor. So it's a win-win situation for both the producer and the consumer.
Yeah, a lot of times IT shop will think, oh, new application, that's about a month time to even spin up. But with a SaaS application, it's log in and start using it. Now, you might have to migrate some data, but I mean, I think that migration timeline's a lot shorter.
Absolutely. And the benefit goes on. You can bring in a device. Now people are hooked on to a handheld device. All you need to know is your device can connect to internet, and that's all you need to access your application that is hosted in a centralized location in the cloud somewhere.
And I've earlier today been talking about maybe sometimes having a hard time finding a graphics card to do some CAD drawing stuff. So maybe you can just use a SaaS CAD offering to make things easier. So SaaS is not new. We've heard about SaaS from the beginning of cloud computing. Why are we talking about it now?
Oh, that's a good question. So if you look at last 3 years when we were in the pandemic era, right? Everybody realized the value of working from anywhere using any device, right? You and I, Justin, all of us were working from home. And all of that was possible because we were using applications that were served over internet, that is software as a service. But when we are talking to a lot of organizations, for example, financial services, for example, healthcare provider, education provider, these organizations are coming to us, they are saying, we understand the value of software as a service, and we do have an IT department to offer technology solution to my employees, to my end users, to my customers, but I don't have the right amount of resources to build a SaaS application, for example. So these organizations do have an option to go and hire these resources and invest on these projects, but then your investment goes high. And then even if you are ready to invest, you are signing up for a lot of time, right? It takes time to execute these projects. So these customers are looking at AWS, for example. Hey, we understand the value of cloud. Can you help us to migrate our application quickly without requiring these resources and investment and make it a SaaS service?
Right.
Yeah, and it's interesting, as we were talking on our last session about you can kind of run anything on on EC2, but with a SaaS model, you could have your application and do it all yourself, set up all the sharing, the VPC, the networking, and everything. You could do it by yourself, and it would take a lot of time and resources. And maybe that makes sense for some folks, but other folks, they want it to be a little bit easier than that.
I mean, taking it a step further, if you're trying to satisfy your application natively, it requires you to rewrite that entire application,
yeah.
right? So with something like AppStream, it's simply a matter of installing it like you would on any device, and then providing that over the internet without having to install it across all your end users.
So you said AppStream. Like I said earlier, so far we've really been talking about workspaces.
Yep.
Let's talk about AppStream, and more importantly, how does AppStream do what you just said, make it easier to SaaSify these applications without that time investment?
So as Justin mentioned, the most important factor when it comes to SaaSifying your application is I don't want to do refactoring, because as soon as you want to do refactoring, you need resources, you need time, you need investment. So what AppStream allows you to do is bring your application as is and host it on AWS Cloud, and that way your compute, your app, and your data is all hosted in AWS Cloud. And when your end user are requesting a session for that application, they just have to bring a device, open a browser, request a session. And the application will be spinned up on a compute instance in AWS Cloud, and an encrypted pixel stream will be streamed over the internet to your end user. And your end user can interact with the application as if it's installed locally. So we have achieved the SaaS form factor because your end user just need to bring an end device with internet connectivity. Your application is hosted in a centralized location, and that's the definition of SaaS.
Yes, and I see on the screen via web browser. We're not just talking about web applications. It could be non-web applications
yeah, these
as
are
well.
these are full Windows or Linux-based applications. They're just being brought to the end user through a web browser interface.
Yeah, because I think that's what you were getting at, that refactoring.
Right.
Maybe those Windows applications, refactoring them to a true web application. And this allows you to not have to do that.
Right.
Okay.
And these, as Manav had said, these customers, they're healthcare providers, they're financial service providers, they're not application developers, right? So
Yeah.
they may not have all the resources to do that native refactoring. AppStream can step in and allow them to SaaSify without having to have the developers involved.
Yeah, so I can imagine there's a lot of benefits to doing it this way. Can you go through some of those for our viewers?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the benefits that we already talked about is no refactoring, right? You bring your application as is. You don't need to refactor, replatform, or re-architect your application. Second thing, I think, Jeff, you were talking about earlier on that you need to specify your VPC, you have to configure your storage, and you can bring your application onto cloud. But what AppStream does it offers you a fully managed service. All you need to bring your application and do the day zero configuration. The compute, the memory, the storage, the networking, everything will be configured in under one umbrella. So it's a fully managed service for you. And an important thing when it comes to audience, when it talks about, hey, the application is stored in a cloud environment, how about the scaling, right? I have users coming in at 9 a.m. and I need, let's say, thousands of users to connect to my service. So
Well, that's one of the major things we talk about as a solutions architect. We talk to customers, and we talk about the benefits of the cloud, that being able to scale out, scale in, the elasticity. Can you walk us through how AppStream scales?
Yeah, I mean, AppStream is very similar to other services that our customers are used to on AWS. So the concepts of auto scaling apply to AppStream as well. So you have the ability to define how your environment reacts based on capacity and usage, right? How many users are using it. But for more predictable workloads, you know that there's a 9 to 5 where your bulk of users are going to be. You can schedule it to grow to meet those needs ahead of time, make sure that the resources are there and available, and then scale it back and save costs when that peak time is passed.
And that way we are promising the you pay only for the compute that you are actually using, because when you're using it, you're paying it. When you're not using, you're not paying it. So that's one of the advantage of using a SaaS as a service.
Yeah, and it's for many years it was just accepted in IT that you're going to pay for your highest amount of workload.
You always build to the highest watermark, right?
And that's
It could be one time a year, right? When
yeah,
you're,
and that's okay. Oh, it has been okay. It's nice to open our minds and start thinking it doesn't have to be that way.
Yep.
We can scale and appropriately and dynamically and appropriately, and it sounds like AppStream is going to help us do
yeah,
that.
and you're not building it all up front, right?
Right.
You can grow as your demand grows and not have to build again for that high watermark.
So we talked about scaling. What about latency? And I can imagine latency. There is probably latency between your device and the virtual workstation, but then latency between the application and the data. Can we talk about how AppStream helps with that?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, there's basically two hops that you have to be aware of when it comes to satisfying applications. There's that front door. There's the time it takes for the user's interactions to make it from their local machine into that instance on the back end. And there's no solve there in terms of this physics is a thing.
Sure.
It takes time for those pixels and those bytes to make it from one point to another. So we do offer the ability to spin up in 15 different regions around the globe. So putting that application as close as possible to the end users is going to result in the least latency and the best experience for them. But then there's that second half, right? So those applications are reaching out and talking to data on the back end, making sure that that data is as close as possible, again, by spreading it into different regions, or even just the fact that because the application is now running in AWS, you are running all of those connections over our backplane, right? High speed, low latency between all of our regions.
Yeah, I try not to say dirty internet, but that's kind of what I'm getting at when you say once you're on the AWS backbone, it's a little bit more reliable, I guess you would say.
Yes. Yep.
And predictable. Maybe that's a better
Predictable,
way to say
yep.
it. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about options within apps. I have some applications that have different requirements, and maybe some need a GPU. We've been talking about graphics cards earlier, but maybe some is probably less graphics related, maybe needs just more memory than others. What kind of options do we have here?
Absolutely. So that is, I'll circle back to the same point. That is one of the advantage of moving your application into a SaaS form factor, because that way your end user are not responsible for making sure I have a graphics card installed on my personal device
Sure.
or not. So as you rightly said, we have different instance type, we call it instance type on AppStream, which can support different compute and memory configuration. So
And
for example,
and for those that are familiar with EC2, it's very similar to
Very similar.
yes.
to choosing those instance type families.
Yeah. So if your application is very compute intensive, for example, you're running a financial analysis, then you need more computers. So compute power, then you can pick compute optimized instances. If you're loading a model and working on an application which designs that model, then you need a lot of memory. You can take memory optimized instances. And as Jeff mentioned, if your application is looking for some kind of a graphics because you're running a CAD application, then definitely a graphics instance types are also available on AppStream.
Yeah. So, and I can see with the CAD, like now that we more distributed, people are working from home a lot. A lot of people work on drawings together. So I could see where having that data centralized could make things easier for the latency. But let's go back to, we're talking about an actual Windows application and refactoring it to be a true web application. So let's go back to that and say, okay, what if we need to upgrade that application? Now, if we did refactor it, it would probably be like like a code push or something in a CI/CD pipeline, and then we have the new version. I imagine it's a little bit different here, but say we have a new version, a new executable. How do we make sure our users have the latest version?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the great benefits of centralizing your application on something like AppStream. It's no longer installed on all of those end user devices, requiring you to make sure that you push out that new update across all those devices. AppStream uses a golden image type model that some customers may be familiar with, where you install and configure your applications once, you create a master gold image of that,
Sure.
and then that gets deployed across all your machines. So if you need to do a software update, it's just a matter of opening that up, installing the new version, and sending it out to your fleet of machines that's then running the application for all your end users.
So then maybe your end user logs off one day and maybe they were logged in when you made that change, and then the next time they log in, they'll get that new version.
Exactly. Yep. You can do these type of updates during business hours without having to bring the whole environment down in order to do that kind of an upgrade.
And that's totally seamless to your end user. They don't even know there's an upgrade, probably.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so in our last section, we talked about Workspace's core and the pricing, how that was different. Can you walk us through how pricing is with AppStream? Because it is essentially a different type of product. So I imagine the pricing might be a little bit different, but can you walk us through that?
So as you can see on your screen, the pricing component pricing had two components. One is the streaming cost. We talked about the application will be streamed to your end user devices. So you can pick the device based on the end user requirement, for example, compute optimized, memory optimized, and GPU instances. Depending upon the instance you pick, you have to pay per hour instance streaming price. And along with that, you also need to pay for Microsoft RDS SAL fee, but that is applicable only for Microsoft operating system. In case you are using Linux operating system, you don't need to pay for that fee. There is a QR code on your screen. Feel free to take a look at it. There are examples. There are detailed pricing available on that page.
That's great. So this whole time, this segment, we've been talking about SaaSifying applications and the benefits to having AppStream help you present your application as a SaaS. But are there ways for AppStream to kind of give you or give your end user a desktop experience?
Certainly, yeah. You have the option. You can, publish just specific applications that you've picked and create a catalog that you then present to your users. Or if there's a need, you can present the entire Windows desktop or Linux desktop and give them that environment.
Through a browser. So
through your web browser, yep. So
yeah.
It's the same look and feel and familiarity that they have with the locally running operating system. It's just running within your browser.
Yeah, and so I could see for my customers, we take it for granted that folks can just install things on their laptops, and the Workspace's thick client. There are some people that can't just install that. So I could see this be a good option for those who don't want to install anything.
Yep, and our protocols are built in such a way that whether you're using the thick client or using the web client on AWS EUC services, you're going to get that same rich experience as well.
Yeah, so we've been deep in the tech, kind of explaining it from an IT professional side, how to set it up, reasons. Do you guys have any good customer examples of how this has helped improve some applications, or just some testimonials?
Yeah, so my first 3 years at AWS, I was working primarily with financial services industry customers and helping them on their journey into AWS EUC. And there's one in particular that had a great story around using AppStream to SaaSify their application. That's IHS Market. They were able to take an application that was traditionally very difficult to upgrade. It was either distributed across all their end users. They did have some users that were using like a terminal server type solution with multi-user to provide the application, but it was difficult for them to do upgrades. They did a POC with us, got it working on AppStream, and actually went live with that solution. And they found several benefits. First and foremost, just the fact that they were able to get these updates out in a timely manner. It used to take them 40 plus hours of work just to do an upgrade and get it out across their environment. They can do that in just a few hours now. But at the same time, they're doing it seamlessly, like you said before. Yeah. The users don't have to know that it's happening under the covers. You're updating that golden image. They log out, they log in again. There it is running for them.
And it's funny you mentioned terminal service. That's something from my past. Like, it's kind of like, you don't want to have to use terminal server to do anything.
Yep.
But a lot of times it was the simple solution that worked. And like many things in IT, over the years, someone fixed a problem and it just kind of stuck around for years and years. So it's nice to be able to have an option to get away from some of those long-term legacy problem solving.
Yeah, and the other, another great benefit that they had that I didn't mention was the fact that just onboarding new customers went from this whole ordeal, right? Weeks, months, even sometimes, to just minutes, right? You just give them access, and they're off and running.
Yeah, that's great. And I can.
I have a very important
Go ahead.
customer quote to talk about. I
Yeah.
was talking to one of the healthcare provider, and earlier the doctors were accessing the patient data by going to their desktop where the application was installed, because it was an on-premise application. But just by SaaSifying their application using AppStream, they are able to access the patient data on a handheld device. So they don't have to go back and forth between the patient room and the desktop.
Yeah.
And they're able to treat more number of patients on an average.
And for this use case, where was the patient data? Was that in region?
In
the
that app, in the app that was installed on the desktop.
But that resided in the cloud, right?
No, that was the on-premise app that they were using.
Okay.
And then later they SaaSified using AppStream.
Yeah, so they moved the data into the cloud.
Yes.
So, and I brought that up because you talked about financial services, so there's PCI compliance there, and guarding the credit card data. And we just went to a medical example when now we're talking about HIPAA data, and it's not that easy to get patient data on a tablet right in front of you. You have to guard that data, and you have to make sure. So this is a perfect example, SaaSifying that application. That data is not really, maybe the pixels are being transferred to that tablet, but the data itself isn't even in memory on that laptop or that tab. So there are security shortcuts, well, I shouldn't say shortcuts, security benefits to using SaaSifying.
And that pixel stream that we are talking about is also encrypted.
Yeah, and that's what, I remember you said that earlier. So helping with whatever compliance program you're a member of.
And then, there's other features within the product that allows you to even prevent people from, copying data out, pasting data in, things like that. So when it comes to security, there's many, many options.
So this wouldn't be an innovation day without maybe talking about what's new. So this whole session we've been talking about why it's, the good ideas for using SaaS, but tell us what's new with AppStream.
Yeah, so just recently there was a new feature launch called Application Manager. This is specifically for the Elastic Fleet option. So we mentioned earlier, it's sort of a serverless model for doing the compute for your AppStream environment, where you don't have to manage scaling policies. You don't have to manage the image. You simply package up your applications, and they're brought down dynamically when the user launches their session.
Okay.
So with Application Manager, we've streamlined that process significantly and increased compatibility. So what Application Manager provides is the ability for administrators to record their installation of the application, just like they would on installing it on a machine, and all of those bits of data and registry keys and everything that makes the app work are captured and automatically put into that virtual hard disk file that gets brought down dynamically. So it's really streamlined that process for administrators.
Sounds good. Anything else as we wrap up this session?
There were a couple of things that I would like to talk about when it comes to see all these things in action.
Yeah.
So we are talking about a lot of things. How can you SaaSify your application? How the whole workflow works. But if you want to see this thing in action, you don't have to wait long. There is a new session coming up at 2:20 p.m. PDT. Jeremy Schreifer is going to present that, and you will see all these things in action.
Yeah, so that's later, just so everyone realizes, that's later today during the Innovation Day. We're going to be talking to Jeremy to kind of see this in action.
Yeah, he's going to be using Application Manager. He's going to package an application, not in less than an hour, but in less than half an hour.
Cool. So now the very last thing, hopefully we've got some folks excited about the possibilities of AppStream. Where would you tell someone to go for more information if they want, beyond seeing Jeremy's demo coming up here later on?
So I shared a pricing QR code earlier on, but if you go to Amazon console or you have AWS page, you just go and search for AppStream 2.0. There is a documentation for admin guide. There is resources available where you can see what all use cases are supported. There are also a lot of blog posts which Justin and team has posted to make your life easier.
Yep. And another great resource are workshops. So if you go back to the admin guide, there's workshops there that you can get hands-on experience and walk through, setting up applications.
Yeah, and if you have an account team, like for example me, reach out to your account team, your SA, and we'll be able to.
They'll bring in a UC specialist to help you out.
Just like you guys. So everyone, thanks for tuning in. We're done with this segment, but we'll be back after a little bit of a break for Jeremy's demo. But thanks for tuning in, and we'll be back in a few minutes.
Thank you.